We'll wait for 3-4 minutes and start. 6 o'clock, sir.
Yeah, I'm ready anytime you want. You are able to hear me, right?
Yes, yes. Vinit, should we start? Are you all set?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone, and namaste. After some gap, FPAP has started this new series. After the first successful series of dialogue with the diplomats, which we titled as the Partnership Beyond Pandemic. This is the new series which we initiated, which we labeled it as Dialogue with Dreamers. Before we start some housekeeping rules, please mute your audio so that there are no echo effects. Secondly, those who would like to ask some questions to our honorable speaker, please send it in a chat box so that during the question answer session, I can collate those questions and present them to our speaker on your behalf. So again, welcome to all of you. And today we have a very distinguished guest in front of us, Chairman and Managing Director of Bharat Forge, Padma Bhushan Dr. Baba Kalyani. He doesn't need any formal introduction, but even to tell you the span of his work over several decades, let me give all of you his brief introduction. He is Chairman and MD of Bharat Forge Ltd. He is also a member of Prime Minister's Science and Technology and Innovation Council, Government of India, co-chairman of Indo-Japan and several other bilateral CEOs Forum. He is also a member of International Advisory Committee of Robert Bosch GmbH, and also he is a member of World Economic Forum. He is past president of Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers and founding chair of Pratham Pune Education Foundation. He is awardee of Padma Bhushan and also Order of the Rising Sun, Japan in 2019, Cross of the Order Merit Germany, and several other international awards. He is also a Doctor of Science, honorary degree he received from Deakin University, Australia, and IIT Kharagpur, India. He also received a very prestigious Lokmanya Tilak National Award in August 19. This whole series we have started with an objective of understanding how Indian industry is thinking and trying to contribute to the Prime Minister Modi's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Therefore, in this series, we plan to bring Indian industrialists who are contributing to achieve this goal, and also few people who are part of multinationals but contributing significantly towards India's industrial and innovation ecosystem. So we are very honored to have Sri Kalyani here today to inaugurate this series. And and without wasting much of the time, I request Sri Kalyani ji to give his talk. Sir, it's yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vijay ji, for this introduction. I'm really honored to be on this platform. And as you said, this is your first new series covering entrepreneurs, so even more so. Let me just, and good evening to all the audience here who is attending this program. Let me just give a little background about myself and about what I do, and then I will try to cover the issues that Vijay ji talked about. I have tried to cover my talk for about 20 odd minutes in 7-8 different areas. And I will first start with my background and my journey, then talk a little bit about what history teaches us, a little bit about how the Prime Minister in 2014 started with the whole Make in India campaign, and and many other concepts, and the current process of how he's getting the entire country into the Atmanirbhar Bharat mission, and how India would play a fairly significant role in reviving the global economy as we move forward. So let me start about myself. I come from a very humble background. I was born in a little village called Chauthaiwale near Aarath, 2,500 people. My father was a farmer, not a very big farmer. He had about 30, 40 acres of land. From Chauthaiwale, I went to Aarath, which was about just 15 kilometers. And from there, I was in Belgaum for my schooling in a boarding in a military school called the King George School. And from Belgaum, I went to Birla Institute of Technology in Pilani to do my engineering. Those days was a 5-year course. And from Pilani, I went to Boston to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology to do my master's in engineering. So much of my life I've spent learning engineering, and much of my working life I have spent practicing and putting this knowledge to work in our enterprises. My father started Bharat Forge in 1966. I joined him in 1972. It was a very small fledgling business, typical Indian business in the late 60s, early 70s, where we had very little technology. Capital was always scarce. People, didn't have money, and my father came from a background of farming. He was not very wealthy. He had reasonable amount of money, but nothing compared to creating an industry. And he was not educated, so he had a problem in terms of engineering. So when I came into the business straight after my master's in 1972, February, uh, the business was about 4 crores of rupees, basically serving three customers, uh, uh, Telco, which is now called Tata Motors. It had a plant in Jamshedpur and a small one in Pune. Mahindras, which used to make Jeeps, and then Kirloskar oil engines that were making uh, engines. And all these things require forged metal components. So that's how we got into this business. The 70s kind of went in consolidating ourselves in the Indian market. And by the end of 70s, early 80s, I started getting a understanding about what needs to be done to this business. And clearly we set a goal for ourselves that we should at least be the best in the country. Uh, in those days, it was very difficult to think about these kind of businesses becoming global or even having the opportunity to export because in the 70s, in the 80s, Indian manufacturing didn't really have a name or a brand or a quality status anywhere in the world. It was a big handicap for most companies. The best Indian manufacturers did was sell in the aftermarket or the spare part market in the Middle East and some parts of Africa. Uh, in the 90s came liberalization in 1991, and that was a huge opportunity where trade got liberalized, capital got liberalized, export got liberalized, technology got liberalized. And just before the liberalization, we had taken a decision that we need to convert our business from a business that used a lot of muscle power. You know, forging is a tough business. You have to use a lot of muscle power to move hot material, forge it, and make it into components. And we set up a plan to convert a business using muscle power to a business using brain power. And I think that was a big point in the history of our business that that kind of put us in a completely different league altogether. Also put us in the area where we started learning a lot of knowledge. And you know, if you remember the 90s, 95 was the worst recession that India had. The automotive industry kind of went almost just like you see today in the dumps. And it took pretty much till the end of 90s to get the industry back to its pre-1995 levels. It was a very long and hard recession, especially for component manufacturers, people like us. But because we had been able to modernize our business, we've been able to bring in automation, we've been able to bring in computer systems, robotics. Uh, in that 5-year period, we were able to crack markets abroad. We were able to get a big customer in the United States, uh, supplying components for heavy-duty trucks. And that's how we really started our first outward journey of internationalizing our business. I remember a meeting I met that time, the chairman of ICICI once, Mr. Wagul, Narayan Wagul. And he kind of, while talking, said, if you want to be somebody in your business, aim to be in the top 3 or 4 in the world. It was a very daunting task. I couldn't even think that I could be anything in the world. But you know, I took on the challenge. I talked to our people. They took on the challenge, and you know, by year 2001, we already had a plant in Germany, which was considered as the cradle of technology for this business, and we were soon supplying to people like Mercedes, which by itself is a pretty daunting task. It's a different story as to how we got that business. Uh, but short of getting thrown out from their offices for being an Indian manufacturer, even thinking of supplying to Mercedes-Benz, everything else happened. But it was a challenging period. And today, for the last almost, I would say, 15 odd years, we supply 100% of their most important component in the engine called crankshaft that comes out of our plant in Pune. And that's been our international journey. And between 2001 and 2008, that 8 years before the financial meltdown came, we grew our business largely on the basis of going global and exporting uh, by almost 10x. And by 2008, by middle of 2008, which was a peak period in manufacturing, that's before the financial meltdown with the collapse of the Lehman Bank, which happened in September, happened. We were already world number one in this business with substantive market shares in North America and Europe. We were even exporting to China at that time, and of course to South America, to Japan, to Australia, and of course in India. And that's been the kind of journey. It's been a very, very interesting journey. It's very difficult to talk about it in few minutes because it's almost 48 years that I have been working in this business. But it's been a very satisfying journey. And we became India's first manufacturing multinational, much before all the big daddies of Indian business. So everything that we did was with our own technology, our own knowledge, and our own capability. And I think people underestimate what India has many times. I mean, we have some amazing amount of talent hidden in our people. It's just a question of giving them the opportunity of bringing that talent out. And today, when we go to our plants in Europe or in North America or in Sweden or France, we proudly see the Indian flag flying outside our office. And that gives us immense satisfaction. So this is a little bit about our journey and my personal journey. Of course, I'm a pretty hands-on person. So I did many of the things hands-on. I almost knew every equipment and machine and capability and technology in the company. So it helped being an engineer to navigate this way. A little bit, I would like to, just for the sake of making some points which are, I think, important, the issues that I'm going to bring on in this discussion. It's very important to look at history in terms of what history teaches us. And I do a lot of reading in history. I like to read Indian history. I like to understand, and especially if it is connected to in any which way to our industry, to manufacturing industry. If you look at our business, which is the business of forgings, or in Marathi we call lohar kam, to shape metal. This is one of the oldest businesses that has been going around for centuries in the world. I mean, in the old days, people made swords by forging metal, heating metal and beating it with a hammer on an anvil. They made arrowheads by forging metal. So in today's world, you make artillery guns by forging metal. You make jet engines by forging metals. You make fighter jets by forging metals. So this is old business that has become extremely important in today's day and age, especially if you want to be self-reliant in whatever you want to do. You want to be a nation that counts amongst the world. So when you look at history, I will just quote two or three historical facts for you. In Pune, we have a very famous lecture series called the Vasant Vyakhyanmala. I don't know how many people have heard of this, but this is something that's been going on in Pune for a very, very long time. Almost, I think, for close to 150 odd years, 160 odd years. And Pune's Literary Society kind of excels in this Vasant Vyakhyanmala. So on 30th of May, 1884, more than 136 odd years ago, in Pune we used to have one English school. It used to be called the Pune High School, and there we had the principal of that Pune High School at that time was a principal named M.M. Kunte. And I will just quote him because this was published in that day's Kesari. Kesari was the newspaper in Pune in those days. And this was published, that is Lokmanya Tilak's newspaper, if you know about Kesari. So he was addressing an audience in this Vasant Vyakhyanmala lecture. And he called on, he gave this lecture in English as he was the principal of an English school. So he called on Hindustanis to learn the art of mechanization. Speaking in English, I quote, Sri Kunte also expressed that if Hindustan wanted its glory to be revived and people needed to suspend the activities of all their religious, social, and sporting groups for a century and a quarter, and are required to travel from village to village, taluka to taluka, district to district, and start the activities of blacksmithing, that is forging, with a frantic haste and zeal. So this was a call in 1884 to, get industrialization going during the British era. We were under the British in those days. Then, almost 100 years later, the late Sri Dattopant Thengdeji, who was born almost 100 years later, wrote a book. I'm not born 100 years later, wrote a book 100 years later called The Third Way. I had the fortune of attending his centenary celebrations in Pune, which was quite amazing, and I had the honor to speak at that centenary celebrations. But again, the reason I'm quoting history is because history is the most important lesson for any country, and I will come to why it is the most important lesson. Dattopantji called Swadeshi the practical manifestation of patriotism and advocated the Swadeshi that was beyond goods and services. His grasp of economics is clear from one para of the book, which reads as follows. I'll quote the para for you. Patriots are not against internationalism. Their pleas for national self-reliance is not incompatible with international cooperation, provided that the latter is on equal footing with due regard to the national self-respect of every country. If you put this in modern words, is nothing different than what our Honorable Prime Minister is talking about in terms of making an Atmanirbhar Bharat. And I'll come to that in a minute. Another point in history that also teaches us that if you look at history, the best innovations and changes in technology or the way of life of people or even of a nation has come when the nation is forced or addressed with the biggest adversity. So if you look at the period of the 30s and the 40s in the United States, that was the period after the Great Depression in the United States, especially the 30s. And if you look at all the innovations that came in the United States, which kind of propelled the world economy for the next 50 odd years, they all came in that period. And they all came because people were forced to innovate. If you look at the period of 1939 to 1944, that was the period when the Second World War was happening, and you had this axis of evil between Hitler's Germany, Japan, and Mussolini's Italy, attacking the Western world in Europe, and then wanting to wage war against America. And at that time, Britain and France called on President Roosevelt to beg America to supply it arms and ammunition. And in 4 years, between 1939 to 1944, 4.5 years, America created a war machine using every private sector company in America that made cars, refrigerators, steel, you name it. And this entire effort was led by one guy who was the president of General Motors, and his name was William Knudsen. And 1939, America had a war with soldiers on horseback. And in 1944, they created nuclear fission to end the war. And that is how rapidly technology changed in 4.5 years. And if I just give you some of the numbers, there's a beautiful book called Freedom Forge by Arthur Herman. In this 4.5 years, the United States industry, private industry, built 324,000 fighter aircrafts, 141 aircraft carriers in 4.5 years, 8 battleships, 257,000 artillery guns, 807 cruisers, destroyers, and destroyer escorts, 88,000 tanks, and millions of ammunition in just 4.5 years. It's just simply unbelievable what happened. And in terms of value, this was $180 odd billion of those times, which is about $2.6 trillion in today's value, almost equal to our GDP today. And this is what made America into a superpower and American industry into what it is. So I think history is extremely important to understand what happens to the world when we are pressed against all kinds of adverse situations, pretty much like what we have today, both on the pandemic side as well as what's happening on our borders. 2014, Prime Minister Modi, after he became Prime Minister, by December, he announced this program of Make in India. Of course, he announced many programs, but I will stick to my area of manufacturing because pretty much involved in that. And since we don't have too much time, it's difficult to talk about everything else. But it's an amazing thought process that he has put into the citizens of this country. And whether you are a businessman, whether you are just an ordinary citizen, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a scientist, or whether you're a researcher, it ignites some fire into you in terms of wanting to do something. And so when he put this whole mission of Make in India, I was in Vigyan Bhavan that time when we had this almost a full day meeting with the Prime Minister, with all the other ministers. And one of those Make in India missions was related to defense. And I was very, very eager that we as a country do something in defense, because one had heard that we got technology for the Bofors gun in 1984, and it came in some 10 truckloads of paper, drawings, prints, all kinds of stuff. And here was 2014, almost 30 years later, and we had no gun to produce. So it was very intriguing, and the reason it is intriguing is because that's all made out of forgings. So we decided that let's do something for the nation. Let's create our own capability to make artillery guns and some other products. And in less than 3 years, we were able to make an artillery gun. And then we joined hands with DRDO's scientists and designed a very, very modern artillery gun called the Advanced Towed Artillery Gun, which is, even by the Americans, it is touted as the best artillery gun in the world today. It has a range of 48 kilometers when most other guns cannot fire anything beyond 40 kilometers. So we have a big advantage with this artillery gun. Right now, it's with the Army under trials in Pokhran. We made many other products. We made vehicles for defense. They are actually right now in Leh because of the problems that we have there. We make ammunitions. We make air defense systems. So there are many things that we were able to do, in a very short period of time. And that kind of gives me a tremendous amount of hope internally that I think as a country, we have tremendous opportunities. And this entire call of Atmanirbhar Bharat at a time when we are going through this severe pandemic of COVID-19 is going to be something, as the Prime Minister said very recently, first on 15th August on the ramparts of the Red Fort, and then I think 2 days ago at the U.S. Partnership Summit, that we will convert this crisis into an opportunity. And the reason why we will convert this crisis into an opportunity is largely because we have a leader who is convinced that this can happen. You know, we have had many political leaders from our independence till today. And of course, I mean, I haven't met all of them, but certainly I have met many of them in the last 30 odd years of my life. And I have never seen the conviction that Prime Minister Modi has in any of those leaders. And therefore, I think if you have conviction, like I've seen it in our own company when we started in the 90s, and we said we want to be in the top 3-4 companies in the world in our business. And I addressed a meeting of about 200 odd people in our company, and I said, this is a challenge we want to take. I mean, the fire in their belly was amazing. They all wanted to do it. And within a short span of 4 years, we were able to make that happen. And I think the same thing is going to happen in India. The last 20 years was, opportunity that China took in terms of creating a global powerhouse. I think the next 15 odd years is going to be India's opportunity. And I say this with conviction because you look at any of the pillars of Atmanirbhar Bharat that the Prime Minister talked about, and we have capability in any of them, whether it's talent, whether it's systems, whether it's ability to reform and rejuvenate, and ability to create new technologies, ability to innovate. I think we have all of this. Somewhere it has just been capped and kept and not been unlocked. And I think the Prime Minister's call for a Atmanirbhar Bharat, for a India to be, let's say, self-reliant, self-sufficient, and India to contribute to the global economy. I mean, if we are able to achieve our Honorable Prime Minister's dream of getting into a $5 trillion economy by 2025-26, you're going to add almost something like $3-4 trillion of value add into the global economy. And this is definitely going to reshape the global economy. So we will have a very large part to play in the global economy as we move forward. I think most of us are, we are working from home. I've been working from home since 23rd of March. And it's amazing that how in a matter of 15 days, 20 days, almost everybody has learned to be digital. Everybody has learned how to work digitally. And it's not just working digitally using a WebEx or a Microsoft Teams platform or a Zoom platform. The beauty of the digital working is we are all doing 5 times more work in a day than what we were doing in our offices, and with much lower cost. And therefore, the productivity and efficiency of India as a country is dramatically going up. Yeah, we have a lot of challenges in front of us, no doubt. But if you look at, I just give 3 examples of how these challenges are overcome. One good example of this is what the milk cooperatives did under the Amul brand for many years. One of the most successful stories in India of what you can do given a target to achieve. The second good example to talk about is our space program, ISRO. Under a very difficult condition of technology denial and all that was there on India because of our nuclear explosion. In spite of that, our scientists and technocrats, along with the private sector, one of the big differences here is to bring the private sector in the center, which causes innovation and which creates entrepreneurship and the power of entrepreneurship. ISRO is today second to none in its space capability. And third, a similar program which was started, of course, many years ago is our nuclear program, which was started by Homi Bhabha. And it has produced some amazing amount of technology. We are completely self-reliant on making our own nuclear equipments. Only thing we don't have is fuel because of the international restrictions in terms of nuclear fuel technologies, etc. But these are good examples of where, when pressed to a wall, as a country, we have been able to achieve things. And I'm sure that today, with the pandemic that is forcing us against a wall, we have an amazing leadership in Prime Minister uh, Narendra Modi, who has given this clarion call for India to become self-reliant. And I don't think this is a call that is going unheard. I think almost everybody in his own way or her way uh, is responding to this call. I have heard in my normal discussion with many of my business colleagues that even how at their homes, because everybody is working from homes, everybody, the husband and wife, has figured out how to be Atmanirbhar at home uh, in terms of getting things done without a problem. I mean, we've been able to manage our health without going to a hospital. We've been able to do all our shopping without going to a shop. So we have learned a lot of new things in the last 3 4 months, and I think this is going to be a very very rich experience for 1.3 billion people going forward. And this is the experience that is going to propel India to being one of the global powerhouses in the world. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thanks a lot, sir. It was indeed a very inspirational speech, full of positivity and motivation in this little depressing era of pandemic. And you have raised the morale and the spirit of everyone by your talk. I can't express my gratitude in the words. Uh, Let me ask you the first question, sir. Have you, because you belong to manufacturing industry, where physical presence of the people on shop floor is absolute must, uh, uh, how are you coping uh, this pandemic crisis as a industrialist?
Well, first of all, you're very right, Vijayji. In the manufacturing sector, you need people on the shop floor. At the same time, one has to also follow uh, enough precautions and care, especially in simple terms of using sanitization, using masks, using social distancing. And I mean, that is a discipline that you have to put into place. You cannot, whether you're working on the shop or you're going to the canteen to have your meals, or whether you're going to catch your bus or your vehicle after work or coming to work. So again, here we have relied a lot on technology. Just like in our own business, we relied on technology to become a powerhouse in our business. We have in these 4 months. One of the things I didn't talk about is we created a group of our engineers who have become extremely good at artificial intelligence and that kind of stuff. So we have now created a system that with our CCTV cameras, when people are coming in on the shop floor, if somebody is not wearing a mask, if somebody is not maintaining social distancing, if somebody has not used a sanitizer coming in and going out, he gets marked on the TV. And all you need to do is just give him a piece of advice and it all changes. And actually, we are selling this system to other companies now. So this was one of the things that kind of just came out of the pandemic as a new product, and we now have a very very strong group in artificial intelligence. We are doing a lot of work in this area even for our armed forces, but that's a different story.
Uh, Sir, you have, sorry, sir, you had a very successful business of forging, uh, and you were catering the needs of the industry. What prompted you to take the challenge and enter defense industry?
This was purely. First of all, I didn't get into defense for commercial reasons. I got into it because every time I read in the papers, every time I looked at this data about India's imports of defense hardware and all these kind of things, it almost curled my stomach almost, because it was such a simple thing to do, nothing very complicated, and why were we not doing it? And there were two reasons why we were not doing it. One, till almost 2012, 13, private sector was not allowed to produce defense products. And I think it was after the Make in India kind of initiative that a full-scale, let's say, revision of policies and you know, direction was initiated. And actually, it was much of this happened during late Sri Parikar's time when he was the defense minister. And after that, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman's time when she was defense minister. A lot of changes happened. And, you know, unfortunately, our defense system is pretty much tied up in a policy apparatus that is very complicated. And slowly it is getting uncomplicated. It is getting simplified. But the centerpiece of that is if in the 60s, when our industrial policies were being enunciated, if we had put the private sector in the middle of our defense apparatus, today India would have been very different. You are muted. I can't hear you.
Question in the similar line. When you enter such a high-tech sector, especially defense, or for that matter, any high-tech sector, we of course need the capital, we need the regulatory regime, but equally important is to have a skilled manpower, a lot of R&D. Do you think that in India we have adequate number and the skill sets available to enter such high-tech sectors?
Yeah, and this is extremely important. I mean, this is something we realized pretty much in the late 80s itself. So in the late 80s, we set up our own technical training system. We now have almost like a mini university on our campus. So we run a program that is run by the Birla Institute in Pilani for a BTech degree in engineering. So anybody who is working in our company who is not an engineer, it's a 3-year program. We give it's an evening program, but we give 1 day off in the week. So it's a full-fledged program that in 3 years he gets actually a BTech degree from BITS Pilani, not our degree. It's a BITS Pilani degree, and he has to go through the same JEE exam and everything else for an entrance. And then we're also running a master's program with the help of Warwick University for the last almost 15 odd years, again in engineering. And this also is an amazing program. Between the two programs, we have something like 50 odd of our employees at any given time in this program. And if you look at it from a 3-year program perspective, it is almost 150 odd employees. Then about 10 years ago, we started a program with IIT Powai, where we requested IIT Powai to design a special MTech program for Bharat Forge, for our engineers, because we wanted to do research. So we said we need a program that will train our engineers to start thinking like researchers. Of course, IIT took a little time, but they agreed and they made a program. And we've been running this program for 10 years now. So this is run on the Powai campus. So our people have to go there for 2 years in Powai campus. And this is how we build our research team. We now have 2 research institutes in Pune, the Kalyani Center for Innovation and Research. It's in Keshav Nagar. And we have another next to it, a Center for Manufacturing Innovation. So our concept is that whatever research that we do, we don't do fundamental research. We do application research. Fundamental research is not our business. That's the business of the CSIR labs and the government laboratories. But we do a lot of application research. So we have application research. We have something like 14 laboratories now. And of course, materials, part of it is the main part of our work. So we do work in materials in every which way. We have right from sophisticated electron microscopes to almost everything else in the materials research area. We do a lot of work in advanced manufacturing, especially in additive manufacturing. So we build jet engine components using additive manufacturing. We do a lot of work in nanotechnology research. So we have a very strong nanotechnology group. And now we have, as we have moved into defense area for the last 7-8 years, we now have a very strong group in the area of radio frequency applications, technologies. We have a very strong group in artificial intelligence. And we have a very strong group in IoT, Industry 4.0 and use of IoT, including machine learning. And this all kinds of comes together because you have to have enough knowledge of AI, embedded electronics, and without IoT, I think manufacturing won't survive in the future. So that's a must. So we have something like 220 odd MTech and PhDs today in our research centers doing work in these areas in almost 12, 14 different areas. And that's our biggest strength. And I think this is what is going to take us into the transformation that we are doing in our business to move from a forging company to being a company that provides solutions in the materials and metal spaces.
So in that context, may I ask you that how much do you spend on R&D and technology development? How much part of the revenue?
We spend roughly about 1.5 to 2% a year. So that is roughly, I would say, around between 50 to 80 crores of rupees a year.
Yeah.
We have also invested more than 150 crores in that, in terms of facilities.
Facilities, yeah. That's very.
What is important in India in terms of R&D capability and spend is not the amount of money you spend. It's the freedom that you're able to give to your scientists and technologists. You know, we don't ask a single question where that money is being spent. You know, whether the project fails or survives. Matter of fact, we are happy if a project fails, except that it needs to fail quickly. We cannot go on lingering with a project for years and years.
Yeah.
So we have a different way of working, and it has produced dramatic results for us.
So again, sir, in such a high-tech area, where the technology is very protected, what is your experience of collaborating with international players in this area? Do they have enough confidence in Indian industry? How you built upon all this?
Honestly, Vijayji, you know, although we have a lot of collaborations with some international companies, but I don't believe any international company will ever give you restricted technology. Because if they gave you that restricted technology, you know, their own business will jeopardy. So I think, you know, we have realized that many years ago, not only now. So although we do collaborate, we collaborate with universities abroad, we collaborate with universities in India, with labs in India, and of course with companies outside. But our reliance is on making our own people develop technology. I'll give you another example. In this COVID period after March, almost from middle of April, there was a lot of talk about the ventilator shortage in India. And, you know, even the Prime Minister talked about it. There was a talk right from the scientific advisor to the Prime Minister, to the Health Ministry, to ICMR and everybody else. So we also took up the challenge of making a ventilator. We said, let's see what this technology looks like. Of course, first we thought it was pretty simple to do that, mix air and oxygen. But it turned out it was not that simple after all. It was pretty complex. And we took a help of Stanford University on a collaborative basis, free of cost. And then Stanford University tied us up with two other universities, Brown and Utah, which both have medical schools, because you need a lot of medical knowledge in how to build a ventilator. And now, and we then became the manufacturing partner for this consortium for the ventilator. And this ventilator has now gone for FDA approval in the US. And it will be very soon marketed. And we developed, of course, co-developed a lot of these technologies. And all this work was done using digital tools. Slack meetings every day with a group from 4 different universities and our group in our tech center here. And, presto, in 3 months, we have a world-class ventilator. So anything can be done.
I am also collating the questions from the participants and asking you. One very important question that has come is that to have a progress in such a big high-tech industry, we also need an ecosystem of ancillary service providers, providers of spare parts, accessories, and also small businesses. What is your experience about this in this area?
It's absolutely right, Vijay. There is a great need for us to build different ecosystems for different areas and different technologies. Uh, and it's not an ecosystem just of businesses and ancillary units. That's very important. And I will come to that in a minute. But an ecosystem that involves our education institutes, our research labs, and our scientific community. Very, very important. Fortunately, for us being in Pune, we are surrounded with this ecosystem. There are n number of labs. I don't know how many, but must be 15, 20 national labs here, both belonging to defense as well as belonging to CSIR, including NCL and ARD, HMRI, and all kinds of labs doing very high-level work in research. And therefore, you have tremendous amount of people with knowledge in the Pune scientific community. So if you have any questions, there are always people there to help you answer the questions. It may be Pune University, it may be COEP, it may be ICER, it may be the National NCL, the National Chemical Laboratory. But this is an amazing thing about Pune's ecosystem. It's a very, very strong ecosystem. And I think we need to have these ecosystems in many cities in India. There are many cities that already have it, but you need in many, let's say, mid-sized cities, so that this whole thing, the knowledge and innovation spreads all across the country.
So I don't know the technical details, but someone asked you if you will be venturing into armored SP guns.
Oh yeah, for sure. There is nothing in this space that we can't do. We are even making small jet engines right now.
Okay. And also there are a lot of people are asking that how do you see our current issues with our northern neighbor affecting Indian industry?
Well, honestly, that's why I gave the examples of history. Whenever there has been a situation in any part of the world where, let's say, sovereignty has been threatened, or a situation has been created like we have today on both our borders, more on the northeastern border, I think the country will come up to this challenge. And all the participants in the country, whether it is business, whether it is government, whether it's just citizens, around that area, they will come to the front. I mean, I have today more than 15 of our people at 16,000 feet. I won't name the destination. Trying out our armored personnel carriers for the army. I mean, when they went there, their oxygen levels went below 70. And it took them 7 days to to acclimatize themselves to get their oxygen back to 95. But they were willing, they were courageous. They said they will go, and they went, and they are there right
Wow.
now.
Sir, your another focus area is definitely the auto industry because you supply a lot of parts, critical parts to auto industry. And that industry is also going through a tremendous transformation with mixed fuel or clean vehicles,
Electric vehicle.
battery operated vehicles, etc. So, how you are coping with these changes?
Vijay, there is no doubt that the automotive industry in the world is going in for a major transformation. I think it would not be wrong to say that the age of IC engines is almost getting over. Just like in the early 1900s, the age of horse carriages got over. And all of a sudden, in Manhattan, you found instead of horse carriages, Ford Model T cars running. Uh, and that's pretty much the same thing is going to happen to the IC engine. You're going to see the IC engine gone very soon and little electric motor or something sitting in there with a battery. I think that's pretty much going to happen. But that is just one part of the technology that people are looking at. My own opinion is that ultimately could be as early as 10 years or could be 15 to 20 years. It will be hydrogen that will drive the mobility economy. And I think everybody in the world who is in the mobility business is doing research on hydrogen. India as a country is also doing a lot of work on hydrogen. And I think we just have to find a way to crack the problem of how to generate hydrogen at a cost that is affordable. It's just like how the lithium battery was, when it first came in, the cost was almost 10 times what it is today. Like everything in the world, as technology progresses, as science progresses, the capability gets better and the cost curve keeps coming down. And the same thing will happen here. So, yes, we will have electric vehicles, there is no doubt. We ourselves are ready for electric vehicles. We actually had a company in the UK and our own laboratory in Myra on the EV business, but we had to shut down that company because of the COVID pandemic. It was just impossible to run it out there. But we are, we are pretty aware and we know what to do. At the same time, it also throws an opportunity to companies in India who are in the IC technology, the internal combustion engine technology. Although it may go, but it will never disappear 100%. So whatever remains, this can be a niche market for Indian companies. Where the Western world won't make it. They won't be able to make it at a price point. So this becomes a niche market for us, and actually it'll be a huge market for Indian companies. And that's how we look at our strategic future.
So, how do you see Bharat Forge coming to a shape in next decade or so?
I think we'll have to drop the word forge and put something else there. Because we will definitely cease to be a company that only makes forgings. It will be a company with pretty high technology in the area of material, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, you name it, and with advanced manufacturing as the core strength of our company. Of course, materials will continue to be at base level of our company because materials are not going anywhere. You need materials to build anything, maybe different materials, but that will be. But clearly, I see us becoming a pretty high tech company. And that's the journey many companies in Japan, Germany, in America have taken. In who started with forging as a business and then moved on to become high-tech suppliers of sophisticated products.
So, sir, my last question is: you also have another side of your personality, and that is a philanthropy. And you started with Pratham Education Foundation supporting underprivileged school children and many other activities. Will you be able to throw some light on it?
Yeah, sure. You know, I mean, this happened like more than 20 odd years ago that we had a meeting in Pune. Again, the principal person who kind of nudged me into this again was Mr. Wagul. And that time he was, I think, chairman of the Pratham Global Foundation. You know, Pratham Foundation was started by a lot of IIT alumni as a means of giving back to society. And when we looked at Pune, unfortunately for us, 20 years ago and even now, Pune has a large amount of slums uh, in between residential pockets. It's not like it's on one side or something like that. Almost everywhere, whether you go to Parvati or you go in the middle of the city or you go outside the city, there's a huge, large number of slums. And that's another story as to why this happens. But we saw the plight of the children there, and it was very moving in terms of their inability to get education. Although education in our state is free and everybody has a right to education. So we started this program of how do we systematically put in a education system which can be not just putting money on the table, just we have to give resources, but which can be measured with the outcome. Most important work is we measure this with the outcome. You'll be surprised today that we have Pratham alumni in Pune who are now executives in companies, some of them working in government, and it's become an ecosystem that kind of, it's like an algorithm that keeps improving itself. Uh, just by its constituents. And we have now something like 25, 28,000 children at any point in time in the Pratham system who are being taught right from learning to read to learning to write to arithmetic to a little higher level of education using tablets, etc. Pratham has its own system of creating books and reading and teaching materials. And we largely use young women from these areas where these children come from and make them, through training, through proper training, into teachers. And it does two things. One, they are highly motivated. And second, they get a great social standing in their community, being teachers. And I think that kind of helps both ways. And it's working extremely well. It's working very, very well. Of course, the Pratham experiment works in many other cities also. Pune is not the only city. But yes, I have been supporting this Pratham, chairing this Pratham initiative for the last 20 odd years. Apart from Pratham, we have taken 100 villages in Maharashtra, right from the drought prone area of Nagar district to the end of Kolhapur. Again, not the green areas in that area, but all the drought prone areas. You'll be surprised there are so many drought prone areas. So we have 100 villages. And again, everything is based on deliverable. We have, just like in business, we have a metrics to measure what your efficiency is, what your performance is, etc., etc. So we do the same thing here. We measure, and there are three things that we measure on. First is, in 3 years, we must double the income of every person in that village. And in the next 3 years, the income must get quadrupled. So this is our measurable metrics. Second, the health condition of women, children, men needs to be dramatically improved. So we have some health parameters. And third, of course, education. Every kid in that village must go to a school, and the school should be in a good shape with proper. The most important thing we found in a village was to provide a school with good toilets and to provide running water. So every village we are working on, we have running water. You'll be amazed at the amount of water that is available in these villages. And there is a village near Pune, about 60 kilometers from Pune, called Purandar. In Purandar Taluka, there is a village. And many of those people used to migrate to Bombay and Pune for work. This is one village where reverse migration has started. And these people, not in the COVID times, prior to COVID times, that people are saying that I can earn more money in the village, farming and growing fruits and vegetables and selling them than I do in staying on the footpaths and shanties of Pune and Bombay. So this is the economic kind of reconstruction, and we work with NGOs. We have a strong team ourselves. Of course, we provide all the financial help. We provide all the technological help that is required. We provide all the connectivity help that is required. But basically, this is what we do. And these 100 villages have roughly about 5 lakh people in terms of population. So I'm happy that we are able to, do something to 5 lakh people in our state.
Thank you very much, sir. And it is really inspiring 1 hour with you. I know your time is very valuable, but I don't know how much you have influenced each one of us and also inspired each one of us to do something not only for the society but also for our beloved country. And your life and your journey has been and will remain the source of inspiration for all of us. On behalf of all of us here who are watching this and also who will watch this on social media in future too, we are really grateful to you for sparing your valuable time and hope to see you soon in person. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vijay ji. Thank you for this.
Namaste.
Namaskar. Thank you.